Hi everyone, this is Rukmini, and I'm just going to be going over how to demolish a spreader. So there's some tips and tricks and strategies for you all so that next time you hit a circuit debater, you guys won't have to panic and hyperventilate. And you too can look like this woman in round. She looks very confident. Okay, so we're going to be going over four main things. First is preemptive strategy. So this is essentially what you should be doing to prepare before you even walk into round and before you even head to the tournament as well. Second is first steps. So this is how to know if you're hitting a spreader, if you have a circuit judge, etc. Third is what to do, right? So some basic strategies to win the round with or without spreading. And fourth is mistakes to avoid at all costs if you want to win your round against a circuit debater. Okay, so first we're going to be talking about preemptive strategies. So this is what you all should be doing to prepare before you even walk into round or head to the tournament. So let me move myself down. There are a couple different things that you guys can use before the tournament. Open case list, block files, and multiple cases. So for those of you who don't know what open case list is, it's basically an archive of like thousands of free LD and PF cases, especially circuit ones. So I'm going to actually show you all, hopefully. There we go. How to use open case list. So first you just have to go to opencaselist.com, then type in your tab room username and password. So I'm going to be doing that really quickly. Okay. So once you get here, this is where you can choose what event you're doing, right? If you're doing PF, click on the PF button. If you're doing high school LD, then click on this button. And since I am LD captain, we're going to go with this one. So once you're here, you can find a whole bunch of information. So first of all, you can toggle through the academic year, right? Right now we're 2024, 2025. You can click through the different events again if you want to go to PF, college LD, whatever it is. Then you can filter it by state here if you want to look at a specific state. And also you can just type in random letters to filter through the very, very, very long list of schools that they have here. So basically what people do is a bunch of schools put all of their cases and tournament information into this website, as well as a bunch of files with evidence, refutations, cases, and all of that. So it's super, super helpful. I'm gonna just choose a random school as an example. Ooh, Perm with the Sigma in Minnesota. Okay. So once you click on a school, then what you can do is you can see all of their debaters. And then if you click on one of the debaters, let's go with this one, then you can see Perm with the Sigma. You you can see tournaments that they go to, right? The rounds, sides, opponents, judges, round report, all of this information. Oh my God, this person went against Skibbity. That's interesting. And usually they'll also have what's called like open source, which is essentially just usually a Word file with a bunch of refutations, evidence, and blocks that they used during that round. So essentially it's sort of a summary of the entire round through evidence. So again, if you click on any of these buttons, then you can see exactly what evidence they used in round. It's too bad we don't have one for Skibbity. That's really a tragedy. But this is really helpful for all of you guys since most of these people that are putting in their information are on the circuit. And also it's just helpful to A, steal evidence because that's allowed, but also prepare against things that you see these people are running in tournaments that they're going to. So that is open case list. I want to go to school now. All right. So, some other things that you guys can use. Block files. I believe Nina and Fiona go more in depth on block files in a different video, so you guys should watch that. But they're basically documents of pre-planned refutations or blocks so that you don't have to worry about refuting in round and you already have all your evidence laid out for you. Then also, you can use multiple cases, right? So you can write different versions of your cases to swap between circuit or traditional rounds. So, for example, you have your stock case, right? Your trad case with your normal arguments, but you can also make a different version of your case with something like a counterplan or extinction impacts to add a little bit of, circuit flavor, which does require more time and research, of course, but it can also really pay off if you know you're going to a tournament where there will be a mix of different debate styles. So that would be something like the La Costa Invitational, right? We have a lot of debaters who are more circuit, but we also have a lot of trad debaters. So it would be helpful to write different cases for a tournament like La Costa. Okay, so this is how to know if you're hitting a spreader, right? If you have a circuit judge, etc. First steps. Okay, let me move myself again. Uh, I'm just gonna have to say there. Okay. Is my opponent a spreader or not? So here's a list of a few different steps that you all can take to figure out in the first place whether you're hitting a spreader. So first is look at their school, right? If they come from a school like Peninsula, Harker, Marlborough, what's another one? Like Harvard, Westlake, they're probably circuit. And if you see the school and you don't know whether they're circuit or not, feel free to ask your captains and leaders and they will help you out. That's already probably the biggest sign of whether or not they're a circuit debater. If you still can't figure it out, though, go ahead and look at their record, which you can find next to their tournament entry on Tabroom. And that will tell you the kind of tournaments that they're attending. So if they are going to more circuit tournaments like the Peninsula Invitational or Tournament of Champions, they are probably a spreader and a circuit debater. At this point, if you still don't know and you're walking into round and you're like, I don't know what to expect, ask them if they usually share their cases with an email chain. If so, they're probably circuit because it's mostly circuit debaters that do that since they are going to spread, so they want their opponents to be able to follow along by looking at the actual evidence. If you still have no idea, just ask them. It's better late than never to know whether or not they're going to spread. So just ask, so by the way, do you spread, right? So you can mentally prepare to deal with that for the next hour of the round. Okay. And then what's also super, super important is whether or not your judge is a circuit judge or not. So, obviously, you all should be looking at the judge's paradigm, regardless of whether you think they're a circuit judge. I believe Kate is going to go into detail about paradigms in a different video, so you all should check that out if you have questions about that. But the paradigm is, again, essentially where the judges write their preferences, what they like to see in a debate, what they don't like to see. And long story short, if you have a blank paradigm or a very short one, probably a parent. If you have a longer one, especially one that includes jargon talking about like theory, Ks or, tricks, something like that, then it's probably a circuit judge. That is the biggest way you're going to be able to tell whether or not you have a circuit judge. Another thing you can look at is the school that they're judging for. So just like your opponent, looking at their school and whether or not it's a traditionally circuit or traditionally lay school will give you a clue as to whether or not your judge is circuit. And finally, just like the last one, ask if you don't know by the end. Just say, Judge, do you have any preferences, before we begin the round? And then they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for in a debate because it's not like you have to be embarrassed about, knowing whether or not they're circuit. It's better to know than to be confused until the round actually starts. Okay, so let's say you've discovered, okay, there actually are a spreader that I'm hitting. So what do you do now? Most important thing you should be doing is case sharing, right? If you know that your opponent is going to spread, ask them for their case, whether it's an email or something else, so that you can follow along because they're going to be bombarding you with evidence, with, warrants, with all of this crazy stuff. You need to be able to keep track of it. And personally, I don't trust my ears well enough to pick up on everything that they say, so make sure to ask them for their cases. Another thing, you guys hopefully have block files, which I was just mentioning a couple minutes ago. Pull them up and be prepared to use them because you're going to need to be efficient and have those pre-planned refutations. Lastly, don't panic. Please, I understand. I used to panic all the time when I hit spreaders because they're scary, right? They're intimidating. But believe me, they're easier to beat than you think because most of them are not actually that great at debate. So we're going to talk about why that is in our next section, what to do, right? This is strategies to win the round with or without spreading. So first, here are a couple of different combinations of a spreader opponent plus a type of judge. So you have a spreader opponent that's established. Now we need to see what kind of style or case you should be running depending on your judge. So again, this goes back to whether or not you want to write multiple cases. If you do, then this is a great slide to look at so you know what kind of different cases you should be writing. So first, let's say you have a spreader opponent and a circuit judge. What can you do? So what I like to call is baby circuit. That's a strategy that you can do where essentially you talk faster with a more circuit case. Now, this doesn't mean spreading. We don't want you guys to like full on spread because most of you probably don't know how. But if you're comfortable with it, we recommend you talk faster than usual, even if slightly, just because that will increase your efficiency. And when it comes to a circuit case, you can run something like extinction impacts. You can run even a counter plan, a T-shell if you want to get fancy. So that's what I call baby circuit. You can definitely do that with the circuit judge. Or what you can do, which I generally tend to do, is stay trad. So meaning keep your traditional case with your stock arguments that you use for your other rounds, but have more complicated refutations. So what this means is, again, you're going to run your normal case, but when it comes to refuting your opponent's case and their impacts, that's when you can use some jargon, right? Like you can say, frontlining or like, I don't know, what's another one? Like impact turn, something like that, right? Feel free to use more jargon when you're going against a spreader opponent with a circuit judge. And then also just making sure that you're like refuting their impacts on the circuit level as well. So trad case, circuit refutations, if that makes sense. So those are just a couple examples of the strategies that you can use with a circuit judge. Now, on the flip side, if you have a spreader opponent and a parent judge, you're probably going to win anyway, but let's just talk about some different strategies that you can use. So what you can do if you want is, I've seen people do this before, is you can stay trad, right? So keep your normal trad case, but for fun, you can sprinkle in some more circuit impacts. So instead of just running a poverty impact, for example, you could tack on like a global recession impact if you wanted to, while keeping the rest of your case traditional. Because this way, your parent judge will still be able to understand you because A, you're not spreading, and B, your case actually makes more sense. But also, you're going to be matching your opponent in terms of like the magnitude of their impacts. So their impacts don't seem like so much bigger than your wimpy ones. But what I usually recommend, which is what I do, is just stay trad all the way, right? Parent judges are so confused by spreaders, and honestly, I am too. So they are begging for someone to give them some sort of like clarity or an easy round to judge, because at the end of the day, excuse me, that is what most parent judges want. So if you stay trad all the way, no crazy impacts, no crazy jargon, nothing like that. Just stay trad with your normal arguments and your normal case. They will love you because you actually make sense to them. You will probably win the round that way. What else? Oh, really briefly, if you have what we call a flay judge, right, which is someone who is both flow and lay, so sort of in between, in the middle ground between circuit and parent, then I recommend you use one of the middle strategies. So again, that's either keeping your trad case but using more jargon and complicated refutations, or keeping your trad case but sprinkling in some circuit impacts. And of course, you can do staying trad with complex refs and circuit impacts if you want as well. But generally, you want to maintain that balance and that sort of mix if you have a flayed judge, because that's exactly what they're looking for. Okay, what is key to winning the round? The answer is efficiency. Efficiency is key because you need to be able to respond to and rebuild as much as possible while using the least amount of time and words. Especially because, and this goes for all rounds, but especially in circuit rounds, because they're going to be throwing a whole bunch of evidence and warrants at you. So you need to be able to respond to them all and rebuild your own case efficiently. So what does efficiency look like? This means A, using block files. Again, we've talked about this like 2 times already because it's super important. You guys need to be organizing and pre-planning your refutation so that they're very easy to pull up. You don't have to waste time trying to come up with a card or a refutation idea because you're already prepared and you know what you're going to say. That will increase your efficiency. Another thing you can do is increasing your speed. Again, you don't have to do this, but if you do feel comfortable with it, we recommend just to be more efficient, increasing your speed even slightly because that will obviously cut down the amount of time that you're using. And this is pretty much only if you have a more circuit or flay judge, not with a parent judge. A really big one, cutting rhetoric. I know a lot of trad debaters, especially inexperienced ones, love to, really hammer in the emotional impacts of their cases, right? They'll say, Judge, it's so important that we try to help the struggling people today, by making sure they have food on their table, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Just cut it. Because I know it's so fun to, go on and on about the drama and the emotional impacts. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at voter issues and what the debate boils down to, no one is going to say, like, voter issue one, food on the table. Like, no one is going to talk about the rhetoric or the anecdote that you brought up. They're going to talk about your evidence, your impacts, and your, like, warrants. So I recommend for efficiency, cut down the rhetoric, cut down, the fluffy words that make parent judges super happy, unless, of course, you have a parent judge. Um, because that is going to increase the amount of time that you have to actually address more important things in the round. And lastly, you guys should be doing this anyway, but signposting is super, super important in order to be efficient because especially when you're going against a spreader, you have a lot to get through, right? Because they're bombarding you with all of this information. You need to make sure you're signposting and being super clear about where you are in the case, because that way judges will be able to follow along. Then also impacts. The reason it is in all caps is because impacts are probably the craziest thing about circuit debate, right? We're over here running impacts like, poverty or like economy. They're running impacts like everyone dies, like climate change, global recession, global trade war. So it's important that while you do want to cut down the emotional rhetoric, you still need to make sure that you balance that with bringing up your impacts and really, hammering those in because impacts are super, super, super important in circuit rounds. So those are just a few ways that you guys can increase your efficiency in a circuit round. And what does efficiency not mean? So, efficiency does not mean spreading like a fiend and giving blanket responses to everything. So, let's break that down, right? Don't spread. Please. You guys don't know how, I'm pretty sure. So, you can increase your speed, right? Just slightly, but don't try to actually spread like they are spreading because, no offense, but it'll probably sound really bad. Don't do that. Also, blanket responses. I know it might be tempting because you have so much to get through to be like, contention one, we say this, contention two, we say this, and move on. But at least try to parse through like uniqueness, link, and impact of each of their contentions because it is super easy to respond to blanket refutations since they're not very strong, right? They're just a sort of overarching refutation to the idea of the contention. But again, you need to balance being thorough and being quick. So obviously, speed is important, but also make sure you're not just like throwing away time with a weak refutation. Try to go through and actually address the contention to a minimal extent, if not more. Okay, so these are some common circuit weaknesses that you guys should definitely be exploiting. First of all, probability, right? They're over there saying things like, a wealth tax is going to lead to global trade war. Is that going to happen? Probably not. Their impacts are often very unlikely. So what's really important is that you ask them about probability. Say, genuinely, how probable is this? Like, can you give me a number, a percentage of how probable this is? Also, I love asking this question. Ask if their impacts have happened before, especially if your topic has any like past precedents, meaning it's been, done on a different country or on a smaller scale in the past. Ask if similar impacts have been seen before, because they probably haven't, or we would all be dead, right? So that's on probability. Then, similarly to probability, spreaders often have very, very weak link chains. So ask them to explain their links. They usually can't. Why? Because again, let's say the topic is wealth tax, right? Which is the current LD topic. They're saying wealth tax leads to everyone dies. So there's obviously going to be a pretty weak link chain in between those two things. You need to really exploit that and make sure you're pointing out to the judge all of the little like weaknesses in that link chain. And then this is sort of more abstract, but I just find a lot of circuit debaters lack fundamental understanding of their own cases, whether that's because their cases are being written by someone else, which does happen a lot, or because they know their cases really don't make that much sense, which they don't a lot of the time. So make sure to take advantage of, probability and link chains, super important, as well as just general understanding of their cases, because I'm sure hopefully your guys' cases are better thought out, right? They make more sense, and the probability of them happening is much higher. Okay, so what not to do? These are mistakes to avoid at all costs if you want to win your round against a circuit debater. Okay, let me try to move myself. Okay, that's as good as we're gonna get. So, some common mistakes that trad debaters make. First, extinction is dumb. Is it? Yeah, it sort of is. But you really shouldn't say that in the round. And by that, I mean whether you just completely drop their impacts and you don't respond to them, or you just dismiss them, saying, like, well, extinction's like, it's not gonna happen. So, whatever. I know those are very tempting because extinction is stupid and it probably won't happen, but they will definitely lose you a more circuit ballot if you have a flay or flow judge. And even if you don't, it's good to just respond to it regardless because it may seem obvious to us that extinction is dumb, but for the sake of the debate, it is important that you respond to every warrant, right? Everything that's thrown out there that you think is important. And extinction obviously is. So make sure not to just throw away extinction on the grounds of it being stupid, though I know it is very tempting. Okay. Another common mistake people make is answering absolutely everything, right? Because circuit debaters, spreaders will throw a lot of information at you. You do not have to respond to absolutely all of it, right? And this means responding to every single card, going overtime, and which is really bad, and also not rebuilding, which is even worse. So do not waste time answering every single card. Just think about it this way. Like when you look at all of the evidence that they've presented, what is going to make it to the end of this round? Right? At the end of the day, what is going to be relevant and what is going to remain relevant when you boil down the debate and you bring up your voter issues? Probably not that random piece of evidence that you feel like refuting just because it's stupid. Move on from it. It's not important. It's not going to be brought up in the next speeches, and it's not going to be in your voter issues. So just don't refute it. Remember, prioritize what's impactful. And then, sort of on this note about not rebuilding, attacking without defense. I actually struggle with this myself. I used to do this a lot more, but what this means is just completely dropping all of your offense and only refuting their case without extending your own impacts. And the reason a lot of trad debaters do this is because on our side, we have impacts like what, like poverty, like, econ, something like that. And on their side, they have impacts that are like everyone dies, everyone burns to a crisp. So it's very easy to get caught up in the circuit drama and think that their impacts like totally outweigh yours and they're so much worse, so you need to refute them. Obviously, you should be refuting, but remember that your own impacts also have just as much magnitude because they're more probable. Just because they might be on a smaller scale or might be less drastic does not mean that you should not be extending those impacts or bringing them up, as voter issues or as terminal impacts in your last speech. Make sure to not get caught up in the circuit drama and forget your own impacts. Last thing I'm going to say is the idea that spreading is unfair. We actually tried to run an anti-spreading T-shell or theory shell, essentially arguing that spreading is unfair. It goes against, the values of debate. We did that at La Costa my sophomore year. It sort of worked, but only because the person we ran it against sort of insulted Lucas Grannis, who, anyway, long story short, do not run an anti-spreading T-shell because it probably will not work. A lot of flow and flay judges do not like it. Similarly, appeals to emotion, be like, but LD is not, it's not about spreading. LD is about communication. Is it? Yes. But again, flow and flay judges are not going to buy it. Parents might, and I'm just going to put that out there because I mean, don't run a T-shell on a parent, but if you say like spreading is unfair to a parent, it might work. I still don't recommend it. I think you should just focus more on the arguments and taking them down rather than talking about why spreading is unfair. Definitely don't do it with a flow or flay judge. Maybe probably not do it with a parent. Okay. Most importantly, remember not to panic. A lot of trad debaters panic when they hit spreaders, but remember, at the end of the day, you are probably a better speaker. In fact, you're almost certainly a better speaker with a stronger understanding of how to debate. All right, and that is it. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, make sure to ask your captains and leaders and watch our other circuit-related videos. You got this, and you are going to be fine. I promise. Thank you so much for watching.